Okay, now we have our 20 by 20 bandana. Fold it in half, scoot it more towards you. There you go. And it now is 10 inches. Give me my Vanna White 10 inches. Show me my 10. There you go. By 20. Excellent. By 20, which is the other one. And the interesting thing about this is we really don't need all of that fabric. So it's very, very cool. If you don't have a piece of fabric, we'll talk about that at the end of the demo. Now, the next thing Clarice has is you're folding your fabric in half and you're gonna measure and cut out a 9.5 inch by 6.5 inch to create two identically sized layers. We are sending you in the mail, this is what I said to you before, I'm gonna send you a 9.5 by 6 piece of fabric that's gonna become our interlayer. This layer is what Clarice is holding. It's 9.5 by 6.5, and she's gonna lay it on top, and that's gonna serve as our pattern as well. She's laying it just off of the fold line and then pinning it. I don't know, do you wanna lay it close to one edge maybe?
Well, I was saving that for ties. Well, I guess either end can be for ties.
Right, no, that's right. You wanna save that.
And then I had it centered on the pattern.
Oh, nice.
You know, we so often do as much as we can to be conservative about fabric, but I thought since it has such a center pattern, I would use that.
So you actually have a design choice here based on what fabric you use. If you want to center it on your pattern, that's completely okay. So good idea.
Okay.
And then she's saving the pieces to create the fabric ties. So she's pinning that down, noting the grain line so that everything is very even. So the edge of her 9 by 9.5 is parallel to her selvage, which is the edge of the bandana and or the fold line, okay? We will not be using the fold in this particular instance.
Right.
And then Clarice is gonna go ahead and cut that out. So note that she's cutting 2 layers at a time. And notice how she moves her body to be in line with the cutting so that she can be as precise as possible. And that really is helpful when you are cutting with scissors that may not be as sharp as you like, is if you put yourself in line with those and make sure that you're standing really over your scissors, you're gonna have a much more cooperative scissor. And now she's gonna cut off that tiny fold line. If you could go to the other side, Clarice, we could see you. You can turn that piece if you want.
No, that's fair.
We had a discussion about the fold and whether we should use it, but we're going along with the directions and there's some reasons why, and we can talk about those later if you want. Okay, so she has her one piece cut out beautifully. And now we have enough left to go on to the fabric ties. So if you're following along, you can say, now on to the fabric ties. Cut 4 thin pieces of material, about 18 by 3/4 of an inch. And we've decided that we're going to use it about 1 inch. And along one edge, you have roughly a 20-inch piece by 2.5 inches, right, Clarice?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So she's marking her 1 inch all along. And then she's going to use that and draw a line. Notice the fancy equipment, a wooden ruler, and a graphite pencil. So
right.
If you don't have a ruler, Clarice and I did a very scientific measurement yesterday, and both of us discovered that our small pinky finger was 1/2 inch wide. So you can use 2 widths of your pinky and mark along your fabric. And then as you saw, she put a tiny dot at the 1 inch increment. And then she drew her line along the 1 inch. So now she's going to, using her scissors, she's going to cut along that 1-inch line. And Clarice, if you pinned that fabric together, or you're just, it's kind of glued together
I
because you
didn't
pressed
pin
it.
it together, but I pressed it together, so it kind of melds it a bit.
Yeah, remember that excellent technique we learned when we were doing our seams, that if you press something together, it really does help keep it together. So here's one, and actually it's two because it's 2 layers. So she has 2 20-inch ties there. And then she's going to cut one more.
I actually have the other ones cut.
Ah, she's already pre-cut. Voila. She's Julia Child in her glory.
And in my kitchen here, I did fix the other one so that I could just show one, but the other ones.
Perfect. So what we discussed is then you want to fold that long skinny piece in half, and you can see that she's got her iron.
I do.
And if you just scoot your machine just to your left a bit, we can see your iron exactly where it is.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So there's her iron on her tea towel, on her tile. She's going to press it to make it cooperative, and then going to press it in half. Once it's pressed in half, you have a line so that you can press or iron. You do want to use steam for this so that you get that thing to lay really flat. See how she's wiggling the point of the iron just a bit to make it just press down a bit more, moving her hand in front of the tie. And now she's pressed it in half. And if you look, you see it's half the width.
Yeah.
And then you can open that up. And this gives you a measurement, a 1/2 inch measurement, so that you're going to fold the cut edge into that ironed line to create your 1/4 inch mark. Because this will be a fold and fold technique. So you have your 1-inch piece, 1 inch by 20. You fold that in half, it now becomes 1/2 inch by 20. You open the fold up, and then you fold the 2 cut long edges in to that folded mark. And then once we have those 2 folded pieces of 1/4 inch, then you can have your 2 folded edges pressed to the center. So Clarice is continuing to fold. And this is precise ironing. And this is where you keep your finger as close as you can to the tip without feeling like you're going to get burned or anything like that. And this is a way, when she did that extra little press, it's just like I'm pressing it into place. So Clarice, do you have your both sides folded in now?
Yeah. So both sides
Okay.
in.
So come around to the camera a little closer so that we can unfold it. Right. So she's folded both sides into her original fold, and now those can get folded together. And that makes our narrow strap. Does that make sense to everybody? Here's the interesting thing. It looks like bias tape, but it is not cut on the bias. So we're making a skinny 1/4 inch strip. I am recording this, so it will be available and I will post it on the, I'm going to post it right on that mask page underneath the instructions, okay? You saw her touch the bottom of her sole plate of the iron, and that is simply to make sure that it's still keeping temperature, because sometimes a domestic iron will turn off if it's on its heel like that, and also to make sure that she had steam. So please be careful when you're using an iron. It is very, very hot. And now we have that folded into our beautiful 1/4 inch piece. We love it when Clarice demos because she's so precise. Unlike that wild maniac, your teacher, Pam, who doesn't pin, but I do always measure twice. I am really a monster about the measurement thing. So now Clarice is going to stitch this using a standard stitch. So that would be our 2.5 stitch. And unless you're on Will's fabulous, he has purchased a secondhand, beautiful Singer old black machine that does go back and does straight stitch. And you would want to be at between 10 and 12 stitches per inch, Will, on you. Those numbers indicate number of stitches per inch. Our 2.5 is I don't know what it is. It must be something metric. So Clarice is just stitching, and basically anywhere you can stitch along that skinny line, you're going to be fine, because the fold goes all the way to the center, okay? And then next she's going to demo the back stitch, so that those of us, me included, because I don't have my sewing machine at home, will be doing ours by hand. So when we're working by hand on this, you will want to use 2 threads. You'll use double thread to stitch with a back stitch by hand. So Clarice is going to show us this lovely, yay, the sewing machine has made a very nice tidy stitch.
Yeah.
She's going to show it to us, and then she'll show us one of her other ones that we will do back stitch on. There it is, stitched, hooray.
Hooray.
And then one of her other prepared ones.
They're all stitched. I will.
You're going to pretend.
Yeah. Here, I'll do that back stitch.
Just to review our back stitch, so
Yeah.
that it's easy. You guys can basically use almost any stitch you want, but double thread, she's tying the knot in the thread. Managed to get that through the eye of the needle very nicely, Clarice.
Yeah. Well, I did that before I got on camera. It took me a time or two.
Okay, so see, the truth is out. It sometimes takes a time or two.
Sometimes. Let's see. Okay, so
Good.
I'll hide my knot in the fold.
Yep.
It's a big knot. It's not a pretty knot.
But one thing about this is if you do it at the end, then you're going to hide that in the masks anyway.
Yeah.
So
Right.
you've got some forgiveness there.
Right. So I'm going to take my first stitch, while I will go in behind where this
Yep.
thread is coming out of the fabric, and I go beyond it so that this is in the middle of my stitch.
Right. So remember, with this one, you are first stitching it back towards yourself,
Right.
and then beyond where your thread came out. And then the next time you put your thread in, you put it exactly where your thread came out, so that you are on one side, it looks like a very nice, even stitch, very close together, just a straight stitch. And on the back side, you'll have some overlap.
Right.
So it'll be an overlapping stitch. And probably that's enough. And you might be able to get it close enough to the camera like you did with the tracing wheel, so we can see it. So there we go. There's the even stitches on one side, and you turn it over and you can see it's overlapping.
You probably don't want to do it in the air.
Yeah, it's easier if you sit down and you're resting your elbows on your knee or on your table, right?
Yeah, you want to support your hands.
And especially if you have a tremor like Clarice.
Yes, it's true.
I always laugh about it because when we're in a fitting, she constantly is taking a picture with the actors moving, or my big old rear end is in the way, and we have to edit out all those pictures. So
Okay, so
now we're going to go back to our instruction sheet, and we have our 4 pieces of material, and you see how it's visually shown to you. Here's our flat piece of material. Fold the 2 long edges in. I'm going to just actually do a quick screen share here. Oh, I don't think I can do it because I'm not visible. So you're just going to look on your instruction sheet that Will has sent and also is in your thing, in your canvas. You fold your edges into the center, and then you fold them together so that you get one thin, long piece. Sew a straight edge. So a straight line of stitching along that. And as it shows in your instruction sheet, that they're using a thread and needle just to basically do a very small basting stitch. So that would also be acceptable. But remember, ties get a lot of use, so it's kind of handy if your ties are backstitched. Okay, step 2. How are we going to add our ties to the mask? Take one of your rectangular fabric layers, and with the right side, or the patterned side out, you're going, with it facing you, you're going to pin down your fabric ties 1 piece per corner. So Clarice is unpinning her sample now and keeping the white piece attached to the back side of one of her bandana pieces. And you can just repin that. And then using the right side of, she's going to pin this is the interfacing, which is the fabric that I have purchased that is the filtered fabric, so that you guys are going to have really nice and excellent masks. And I'm going to mail those to you at the same address I mailed before. And before we're done, we will double check on that, okay? So pinning that together. And this is not in your instruction sheet because they're not telling you to put in this extra little piece of filter. Holding for the train going by Clarice's house. Okay, so that's pinned together, and then taking the right side of her fabric and the 4 ties, she's going to center 1 tie in each of the 4 corners. And then pin those in place. And on our sample pattern page, they are angled in from the corner.
Oh, they're angled in.
Well, okay. Slightly. They're not really.
Oh, yeah.
They don't have to be. Actually, I think they could be.
You don't want it right where they're turning the corner, right? Just in from that.
Why don't you put them on the short sides? Yeah, put them on the short side, and then that will just go, that would be fine. So let's say 1/4 of an inch down from the edge on the short side.
Yeah.
And both of them go to the short side.
Right.
And then go to the center. And then we're going to hand stitch those in place. Whether you're working with machine or hand, you will want to hand stitch those in place just so they don't wiggle around.
Oops.
So after she gets all 4 pinned, we will work with all those stringy pieces that are left, and we're gonna secure those down to the center of our mask. So she's pinning that last piece. Is that silver thing your pin box?
Yeah, it's
Is it an Altoids box?
Yes, it is.
And I only know that because my pin box looks exactly the same. We thought, wow.
Really?
Those are such handy little boxes, and
I
look, they
know.
fit
No,
pins, and then they don't open because they're pretty secure. And
yeah, they
you know,
are. They're, yeah.
it's funny how many people have that kind of a box.
All right.
If you don't have one of our handy little magnetic pin keepers like we have at school, we're back to the Altoids box. So each of those is pinned in the corner, and the long part of the tie is just hanging out.
Yeah.
And now she's just going to secure this. And this is actually called the stab stitch. She's going to stitch all the way through 2 or 3 times just to keep it in place. There's 1 and 2, and then tie a quick knot. And then really all this is doing is holding it in place until we stitch the outside edge together. Does that make sense for everybody?
I think you're just better off without those pins in there where it's so bulky.
Well, and when you're trying to stitch another layer on top and you can't see your pins underneath, it can be very dangerous because you could accidentally sew over your pin and then break your needle. And we all know then you're in the middle of a project and you have to take everything out, cut your thread, put a new needle in. So hand sewing, we endorse it. And the great thing about it is you'll never break your needle with a hand sewing.
Right.
So just hand stitch your stitches in. While she's doing that, I just want to remind you that if you have a sewing machine at home and you're not familiar with it, or you'd like a little more one-on-one instruction, Clarice is available to meet you on Zoom. Anybody can open a Zoom, it's free, and then just pre-arrange with Clarice via email a time, and she can take a look at your machine. Like right now, if her machine was turned around towards me, I'd be able to help her get it threaded. I can even see from this angle where certain things would go. And also if you're having a problem, like inside the bobbin box where the bobbin casing goes, and maybe you've gotten some thread wound up in there, we can look in there and give you some hints about how to get things untangled. So we're going to take a look at this. And then you might wonder what we're going to do with those long stringy things and how we're going to keep those from getting, like, a very annoying thing would be you try to be putting your 2 layers together and then you get one of the straps on the outside instead of on the inside, or you make a loop instead of having a strap. So what we'll do is, as shown in the drawing from the New York Times, we're going to fold the ends of the strap together, and then we're going to do 1 basting stitch in the middle to keep it all flat, and that way it won't come undone, it won't wiggle around, and it'll be very, very secure for us. So again, remember our basting stitches: no knot, single layer of thread. We're just going to put all those together and then just hand baste them down to the center. And Clarice is going to put them together now. So just loosely folding them, and you can actually kind of pile them all in the center. You just want to keep them away from the edges and keep them controlled. And it makes a much tidier little thing. It's kind of like Christmas tree lights. You know what I'm saying? Those Christmas tree lights, they are so unruly. So if you can kind of twist them all together, I have a technique. The one good thing I got from someone whose name will not be mentioned was a way to get the Christmas tree lights. So she's just loosely basting this together, and that's something we're going to take out. So it doesn't matter if it looks like a string of Christmas tree lights balled up in the center. But it's controlled, and we don't have to worry about, we know what that was. That's too short of a thread with no knot.
We don't knot basting often, but I'm knotting it in this case.
Because her thread is so short, she's trying to economize.
Right out. Trying to not have to thread my needle with everybody watching.
Uh-oh, do you need new glasses?
I do actually. Yeah.
Well, between that and, not going out, I was looking in the mirror today and I thought, wow, I'm so overdue for a haircut.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay. So there it is. The corners are
Right.
just attached and the center is basted down.
Okay, and then we get to our other piece, which is the white piece of interfacing that is our filter that is pinned to the wrong side of our bandana. And to make this easier to handle, we're just going to do large basting stitches all the way around. And again, that just keeps us from having to use a pin. And then this just treated as one layer and it makes it much easier. So this is a pretty fast thing. Remember, for a basting, you could put a knot on the end of this if you wanted to just secure it in place. And you just go in, out, in, out, in, out. And this time we're using basting stitches instead of pins, just to secure the two layers together. And when Clarice gets down to the, when she's all the way around, I'll have her hold it in front of the camera so you can see it. But roughly when I'm thinking about hand basting for this kind of a thing, I'm thinking about putting it like one stitch every 3/8 of an inch. So it's a pretty big stitch. So it's like just less than my little pinky finger. You could do every 1/4 inch. You'll get into a rhythm so that you say, okay, I'm going to take a bite and I'm going to do 3 bites with my needle before I pull through. Now it looks like about what she's doing. And then
And oh, go ahead. I think also you just want to think about not putting it right on your stitching line, which is at 1/4 of an inch. They have a stitch this, the final stitching, either inside of the stitching line and you don't have to take it out, or I did it, it would show, but I'm going to take it out.
So Clarice did it at wider than 1/4 of
Yeah.
an inch, so more towards the center of the mask than towards the edge of the mask. Okay, so all the pins are out and we now have the 2 layers able to travel as one, and Clarice is going to show us on the white side what her basting stitches look like. Okay?
And not too neat, but they're flat, so it will serve the purpose.
Great. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Okay, on to our instruction sheet again. We have our rectangle fabric ties already stitched in. And now we're going to put it together at step 3. Take the second layer of fabric and line it up with the first. The right sides, or the pattern side of the fabric, should be facing each other, sandwiching the fabric ties or elastic. Secure the fabric sandwich with pins. So Clarice is going to put her pins in here. We'll have one side will be the white side and the other side will be the inside of the red bandana. In this case, I would pin perpendicular because I would like, if I'm sewing with a sewing machine, I'd like to be able to sew over my pins. So don't get worried about making this mask. We're going to be spending a lot of time for the next 4 classes on making the mask so that we can all be successful together. Even if we are hand sewing, I will prepare my pieces so that I'll be hand sewing along with you. And then I've looked at the syllabus and we're actually following along the daily syllabus really specifically, which is terrific. And that daily syllabus is located in home if you wanted to take a look at that, which says that we will be doing our Technically, it said crew handbook due today, and oh my goodness, happy tax day, but thank goodness they've postponed that. But this was our day to demo the pattern layout, marking and cutting it, and pattern and fabric prep and ironing. So we're giving you the demo for how to make our construction project. So that's why we're following right along with our syllabus. You guys, I am so super proud of you that we can actually complete this class and get the information done that is in the class. So very, very exciting for me. Now, Clarice, you want to show us that it's all pinned together?
Oh, okay, pinned.
There we go. And now, what is the one critical thing you see about the step 4? It's you will start stitching halfway along one of the long edges. So you remember that you have the 9.5 side and you have the 6.5 side. So you're going to stitch halfway at a midpoint, and there's a reason why we're doing that, because we're going to leave a little opening. So sew a straight line across the mask about 1/4 of an inch from the bottom edge of the fabric towards the bottom corner. Now, what is our 1/4 of an inch mark? It is the width of the presser foot, and almost every presser foot is a 1/4 of an inch. So for this purpose, whatever the edge of your presser foot is, put that on the edge of your fabric and then continue to stitch along your fabric edge. For those of us who are hand sewing, you can make a couple of marks for it, or I generally sort of put it up to, and I figure, well, it's about a 1/4 of my fingernail or something like that. So you will sew a straight line across the mask 1/4 of an inch from the bottom edge of the fabric towards the left-hand corner, and removing the pins, make sure your ties are secure. And we've done that because we've hand stitched them in place. And then make sure your needle goes through all 3 layers, the top layer, the end of the fabric tie, and the bottom layer. And in the corner, add a couple of stitches forward and back in both directions to make sure your ties are secure. And then continue sewing around your perimeter of the fabric layers as you need to, back stitching in your corners, repeating that whole forward and backward motion at each corner to secure your fabric ties until you come back to the long side where you started and allow for an 1.5 inch gap. That gap is going to become very important because we are going to turn our mask right side out using the gap. So Clarice is doing back and forth. Notice that she's using the hand wheel. And if it feels too thick, you can always use the hand wheel to go over the corner piece, and that creates a secure stitching without having to gun your accelerator on your machine. It just keeps it uniform. So we're done with our stitching, and now she's pulling the fabric away and going to clip the threads, removing any pins. And now we're ready to turn it right side out. And this is kind of interesting. You're going to reach in through the little tiny gap, and Clarice is going to put her finger in there, right on. And you start by putting your finger in and just putting the corner, the far corner through, and you can use that tie to help pull the corner towards you because the ties are secured towards the corners. So she's continuing to pull each of the corners through one at a time through that little hole, and it's looking, it looks, when you're in the middle of this, you're thinking it's never going to work, but it's not going to go through, but it will. And you can use those corner ties to pull those corners out. And you can see it just feels like, wow, it's all kind of all balled up there. But this is why you really want those ties to be secured in the center instead of with pins, because you don't want to poke yourself when you're reaching in there. And you can use the tie to pull the corner out. And then Clarice can remove her basting stitches. And then you'll see she can hold it up and it looks just like our sample. Hooray. Voila. There's our flat piece. And those corner ties really do help pull it out.
Yeah, they really do. That's wonderful.
Because we've all fought with those, I'm telling you. We've made
Yeah.
we've made a lot of ties and it's not fun.
No.
Okay. So now Clarice is going to iron that
Mhm.
just to get our edges ironed, and also look at our little 1.5 inch hole. And we're turning it right side out. You're going to make sure that you keep that 1.5 inch gap, the folded edges in at 1/4 inch, and then we'll hand stitch that closed. And now we have these fabulous little legs stitching out.
Mhm.
Our ties are sticking out. You ever see Clarice making details, make sure she doesn't have any extra little threads showing, and keeping those corners and seams flat. Really nice. And notice ironing both sides and looking with careful attention at the 1.5 inch gap to make sure that those are folded in at 1/4 inch so that we can hand stitch that closed. And that can be stitched with your slip stitch. That will easily hold it together. And, or you could do your back stitch and that would imitate a sewing machine line. Then Clarice is going to bring that over to her cutting area. And we're going to go on with step 7. Pleats, please. So this is what we're going to just, I looked at several different videos and some of them were so complicated at this point, I just thought that is too much. So what you're going to do is make 3 staggered pleats. Holding your hands on both sides of the long side, just pinch and make a pleat about the width of your finger, and then put a pin along the stitching line of each side. So along the short stitching line. So you're going to make one pleat and kind of even it on both sides. You'd like it to go straight across so that from the tie to the pleat is equal down the side, and you can do that by, you can kind of fold it in the center and you can match and make sure, or you can use your tape measure. But also show them how you can fold it, Clarice, and then just make sure that it, just
I'm sorry, say that.
fold it in the center and make sure that your pleats are kind of matching. Other way.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Hold it in the center the other way.
Okay. This way. Oh, Pam, I get it.
There you go. Now you can see that your pleats are even, right? So that makes it really easy. And then Clarice is going to make 2 more pleats, and then we can iron. We're going to quickly iron those down.
Okay. Do it at the iron.
So you could do all kinds of exacting measurement if that's the thing that you love. I am personally good with eyeballing it. The pleat is simply to allow it to fit over your face and to make room for your nose, okay? So then it just helps the mask conform to the wearer, because again, you want it to be above your nose, above your nostrils, on the bridge of your nose, and under your chin. So in order to do that, we need to give a little bit of extra room to allow for those protrusions, the nose that stick out, and then it will still be close to our face because we have the pleats on the side. So you can see she's continuing with the pleats, pinning each of the edges on the short side and then ironing those in. Okay, so at this point, I'm wondering if this reminds you of anything. There is a garment that is very much like exactly what Clarice is making, and it's a cummerbund. There you go. It's in men's
Pandemic's over.
We'll have our
in
cummerbund.
men's formal wear. We would have the cummerbund, which is it is very nice, clean finish to cover up the ugly part of where the top of the trouser meets the shirt. So it gives a nice black line. And now where it's pinned on those corners, you want to show us a close-up of that, Clarice, before you stitch? Beauty. There you go. We can see all those little pleats.
Yeah.
So, and then finishing, all you want to do is stitch over your pleats first so that you can get your pins out of the way. And then you will continue by stitching all the way around at 1/4 of an inch.
Line down the short sides first.
Sure, yes, go down the short side.
Okay.
1/4 of an inch. And we know our instructions are reminding us that this is called top stitching.
Yes.
And we know that because we're going to see the stitching at the end. So you're going to stitch carefully over those pins. Clipping any threads to make it very tidy, and stitching the second side over. And that way we can stitch around our mask, but first we're focusing on stitching over the pins in a safe manner so that we can secure the pleats. Yes, that's true. If your machine is struggling to get through the layers, you walk it over the layers with your hand wheel, and Clarice can demo that. You can just, this is called walking your foot. Thanks, Maggie, that's exactly right. You walk your foot over if it's too thick. But the beauty of the bandana is it's not really such a thick thing. It's not like doing a leather jacket or something like that.
Okay, we're held in place.
And now we can get rid of all those pins. Hooray. And our final step is to stitch all the way around at 1/4 of an inch.
Okay.
So this should be the two long sides. And again, using the presser foot as the guide for the 1/4 of an inch. And you can just stitch along, and you're now flattening all those layers together. We talked about why we wouldn't be using the fold. And one thing is the layers of the seam create a density and a firmness so that it will grip your face better than a soft fold would. And now just continuing over that at 1/4 of an inch on the short side from top to bottom. And note she's putting her needle in and pivoting to keep that corner stitching tidy. And then continuing along, watching where the needle's going to go, not watching the needle. And then in the corner, again, putting the needle down with the hand wheel, lifting the presser foot up, and then finishing on the short side. And it is recommended on the mask instructions that we do a second line of stitching on the inside of this line of stitching at 1/4 of an inch. So what Clarice is doing now is clipping the threads so that we don't have any extraneous threads. That these are things that help ball up the machine in the bottom. Really, really frustrating. So she's clipping her threads all the way around, and then we'll just simply put this back into the machine. And again, using the presser foot, she can sew inside of that first stitching line towards the center of the mask at 1/4 of an inch. And just this, in this particular instance, she can go all the way around the mask without worrying about, you could even start in the center, Clarice, if the corner is a little too thick.
I think the corner's okay. It's my fold is a little bit in the way, but it's okay.
So what I would do is if your corner is thick, it's easier to start in the center of your mask, in the long side,
Yes,
instead of at the corner, because when you start at the corner, sometimes your thread wants to ball up underneath in the bobbin area. So instead of starting at the corner, you can start in the center of the mask, and that way you also help secure that opening where we folded it in. And by the way, where you hand stitched it, right? So using the presser foot, she's stitching it on the inside and going all the way around the mask. In a moment, we'll see the finished mask. And Clarice is going to hold it up and she's going to model it. Great, all the way around. And now clipping the threads so that we have no extraneous threads. We've got a beautiful pleated mask with long ties that you can then center it over the nose and tie above the ears. Just a quick little press. But you're going to tie it above the ears so that one goes kind of up over the head and then one goes behind the head. And those ties, cotton tends to want to grip. Maybe she could take the close-up pictures. That's a good idea. Yeah, we'll have her take some pictures with her cell phone.
Okay.
So go all the way up to the screen closer. There you go. So you can see the stitching on the end. Hold, don't move it around. So you can see the two lines of stitching, the pleats, and how the little ties come out. And let's see the back side. Okay, and there's the back side. So she wanted to go with that pattern, and we'll have her take some pictures and we can post those up on the canvas as well. Thanks for that suggestion, really good one. So there we go. Any questions?